Hello everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo with another video, and we're ready for another installment of Frank Zappa, one album at a time. And with this particular entry, let me kind of set the stage. So in July of 1972, I had turned 14. And at that time, I had a sizable, for a 14-year-old Frank Zappa mother's collection. And this is what I had. I had Absolutely Free. Then I also had Lumpy Gravy. And I had Hot Rats, and I had Burnt Weenie Sandwich, which remains to be one of my, top 3 favorite Zappa Mother's albums. I can never really say which one for sure is like number 1, but that's definitely in the top 3. 200 Motels, had that. And I had Fillmore East album. And I had Just Another Band from LA. And the Fillmore and the Just Another Band from LA records were the most recent ones that I had bought brand new in a store. And then one day, later in the year, after I had turned 14, I'm in a record store and I see this. And I'm like, wow, a new record by Frank Zappa. And, it's got the Hot Rats on the handles there for the sink. This Waka Jawaka. I was like, wow, what is this? So, and I also have a Japanese pressing of this. Very, very fine album. The Japanese pressing is going to be on the Reprise label, the original on the blue label Bazaar. But anyway, I was just really, really excited about this record. I bought it, took it home and started listening to it. And I was like, ooh, just really, really excited. And then I took it over to a friend's house and played it for them, because these were friends that we often listened to Zappa, particularly the comedy albums, Fillmore and Just Another Band from LA and 200 Motels. We listened to these records a lot. And so I'm playing it for them and I'm like, really excited about this. And they were like, I don't like this. There's no singing. It's not comedy like the other stuff. And I was like, Now, granted, at that time, I was very much involved in the school band, and learning about music, and I already had a somewhat musically eclectic upbringing as a child with things that my mother had listened to. My friends did not play instruments. And I just couldn't believe that what they were hearing, wasn't getting to them. This record was truly, truly amazing to me when it came out, because it was a big departure from what Frank and the Mothers had been doing. Now, there was, you could hear echoes of the original Hot Rats, and to some degree a bit of the structure that you would hear in Burnt Weenie Sandwich. But again, it was still so different. And it was this big band that he had put together. Well, yeah, so the record came out in July of 1972. And the sessions that produced this recording occurred in April and May of 1972. This was a tumultuous period for Frank. All right, so this all kind of, well, a lot of things were happening in latter half of 1971 going into 72. There were several catalysts that I think that all just kind of came together. One of them, of course, was the show that was in the fall of 1971 at the Montreux Casino in Switzerland, the infamous, Smoke on the Water. And during that show, someone shot like a flare gun, and it started this fire in the theater, and it burned the place to the ground, just like the song is talking about. And the Mothers lost their equipment. They lost their instruments, they lost all their amplifiers and other electronic equipment. It was a devastating blow for the band. And this happened, in fall. They were getting close to the end of the year, and uncharacteristically, Frank, he wanted to just chuck it in and cancel the rest of the show. But he let the band vote on it. And the band wanted to continue as long as possible, and because they had sold out shows already booked. And the band wanted to make as much money as possible before Christmas and heading back to the States. So Frank did cancel all the French and Belgian shows, and then they went to London. Then on December 10th, 1971, they're playing the first show of 4 planned shows. There were going to be 4 at the Rainbow Theater. And they just finished the first show, and then they were going to come out for an encore. And Frank, as they were going to begin the encore, Frank walks out on stage alone. The band had not come out. And this guy runs up on stage and pushes Frank off the stage. He fell 10 feet down into the orchestra pit onto a concrete floor. Suffered multiple broken bones. It also left him with a crushed larynx, which actually changed the sound, of his voice. It dropped half an octave, which Frank actually kind of liked. It was one of the outcomes, but nonetheless, he was seriously injured. And then this guy, who was this 24-year-old man by the name of Trevor Charles Howell, he then leaves the stage. And about that time, the band starts to come out on the stage, and they don't see Frank. He's not there. They don't know what's going on. And there's this bit of pandemonium going on, because as this Howell character is attempting to make an escape, the audience grabbed him, hold him, and then they turn him over to the roadies. And the roadies take him, and they give him a beating. And then they hold him for the police. Meanwhile, the band figures out that, something happened to Frank. Here he is down in the orchestra pit. His body was so twisted that one of his legs, I guess, was like twisted around behind his torso, and he was on top of this leg. So he was rushed to a hospital, and he was hospitalized, including some time that he spent in a clinic until mid-January. And then he left Hawaii, or he left London, and then to recuperate in Hawaii for a while. He was in a body cast up to his hips, both legs. He was in a wheelchair. So there were some questions about whether, he was going to be able to play again, or at least play live. But then there were these other issues going on. This was during a time period when he was having some marital strife with Gail. And when he was hospitalized in London, reportedly, when she showed up, she flies to London because she wasn't going on tour with him at the time. And she arrives in London, and she's got to chase away Frank's road girlfriends. So there were these tensions going on that continued at home when they returned home, and he was continuing his recovery. And then there were some tensions erupting with some members of the band, particularly Howard Kaylan and Mark Volman, Flo and Eddie, who Frank considered to be his friends. He really, of all the musicians that he played with, he never really considered any of the musicians as friends. I mean, they were his employees. And Flo and Eddie, he kind of felt like that there was a friendship. But then they started saying in other places in the music press that they were kind of fed up with the way Frank would absorb their ideas that they would pitch. He would like them, and then he would go scurry away and then write some music, and then it was no longer their idea, it was Frank's idea. And there were some other musicians who were also voicing similar concerns. So you got that going on with Flo and Eddie deciding that, they're just abandoning him. Gail trying to remain with Frank and the family, despite there were some apparent efforts that Frank may have even been trying to push her out. But she resisted and stuck around. So when he did start touring again, she started traveling with him. She was there for 200 motels, but for a lot of times that Frank would be touring, she wouldn't be with him. She would be back home. So yeah, all this stuff is kind of going on, but Frank is still developing music, and he has these ideas bubbling up, and then so he brings together a jazz fusion band. This assembles a very big band. At one time, it was a 20-piece band. That was the Grand Wazoo Band, and then there was the Petit Wazoo Band, which was a 10-piece band. These were bands that he toured after he had recovered. So in that late winter, early spring of 72, he's back in the studio, recording stuff while he's still in a wheelchair. And he brings this group together. And this was also at the time that some others had approached him, a real Reuben and the Jets, and they wanted to use that name for a record that they were going to do, a doo-wop record. They were inspired by Frank's album, Reuben and the Jets. And he was very excited about that, loved that. He helped produce it. So at the same time, he's producing this record that was released as Reuben and the Jets for Real, which unfortunately I do not have a copy. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen one in the wild in stores. I mean, I'm sure there's some Discogs sellers that probably have it for sale on occasion. But anyway, and then so he's recording this fusion band, and these were the sessions that created Waka Jawaka, and also the album The Grand Wazoo. But I'll save The Grand Wazoo for, another video. This was an interesting deal because you've got these musicians who are basically studio musicians. They don't have a lot of experience with improvisation, which is a core element of jazz, and particularly with jazz fusion of that time. There were very much a lot of improvisation going on. But Frank is also, while in the Hot Rat session, he was allowing for a lot of improvisation and cooperation going on, developing the songs. He was still focusing very much on, I'm going to write this down and you're going to play it kind of thing, which helped because while Ainsley Dunbar, for example, is just, a killer rock and roll drummer, he lacked the chops, so to speak, that a jazz drummer needs to have in order to rein in players who are, improvising right there during a recording session or during a show. So you really have to rely on the drummer to maintain control and bring people back together. And that was something that Ainsley Dunbar was not necessarily really good at. And then plus, as I say, the other musicians were largely session musicians. But it ended up kind of working out with a couple people that probably really helped with that. You've got Ainsley Dunbar, a tremendous drummer, but then this is when Sal Marquise, a trumpet player, kind of fits into the scene with Frank and shows up on not just Hot Rats and the Grand Wazoo, but other subsequent records. And Sal Marquise had a music degree. So it was interesting how some of the songs developed, in particular the opening track that is known as Big Swifty, which covers the entire side one. And so during that recording process, what Sal Marquise would do is he would be listening to Frank's guitar solo after it had been recorded. And then he would be playing it back and forth, listening to the tape. And he was transcribing the solo into sheet music for horn players. And now, while Frank, as a composer, he could hear what's going on in his head for the particular instrument. He would, he could write down the little dots, the notes and all that kind of thing. Transcription was something he, didn't do. So he was very much amazed by what Sal Marquise was doing. And then after the transcription, they would put this little horn section together or do some overdubs so that they would have 3 trumpets, and then they would play on their horns the guitar solo that Frank had played, earlier in the song. And that created the big, dramatic ending for the conclusion of Big Swifty. Amazing song, Big Swifty, and also the closing song, Waka Jawaka. These are 2 songs that have a really strong big band feel. And they have these moments where you think things are going to start to wrap up, but then they go off again with the repetition of the melody. You have this theme going on and the different variations, that are developed throughout the song. It's really really enjoyable to listen to. I just find Waka Jawaka to be a really, really brilliant record. Then in between these two big band pieces, we've got these two, for lack of a better term, is going to be Your Mouth, and it just might be a one-shot deal. So Your Mouth is a little curious song. It's there's this little story going on where this guy's girlfriend or whatever comes home late, and it's kind of, it's borderline violent and potentially misogynistic in that, the guy is, holding back from, why shouldn't I just shoot you for what you were going out and doing? Which in the song it doesn't happen, but that's the sentiment of the song. With just the advice in the song is, let your partner, just let them talk and then they'll dig their own grave. Given the fact that at this time we've got all this tension going on between Frank and Gail, I kind of wonder if this song was, taking a slap at her. Don't know, just seems oddly coincidental for that time. And then there's the song It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal, which again is really kind of peculiar. These are the only two songs with lyrics. And it's essentially this song about a frog who is dragging all this dirt along, and coming into your home. And then this forest rises up from the dirt and it can obscure your view and make you feel like you're trapped, kind of thing. But then the song is saying that, even though this might scare you, there's a line, you can be scared when it gets too real. But, then it says you should be digging it and watching what's going on while it's happening, because it just might be a one-shot deal. To me, this song is kind of a Zen story. And while there are not many references to it, Frank, I won't necessarily say studied or practiced Zen Buddhism, but early in his life, he did a lot of reading on a lot of different things. I mean, after high school, there wasn't, there wasn't much post-secondary education. He was largely self-educated beyond high school, and even during high school to a degree. And there are a few references in some biographical pieces that talk about how while he rejected religion, whole cloth, he did find some elements in Zen Buddhism as being acceptable to him. And you do kind of hear this from time to time in many of his songs. So yeah, this just might be a one-shot deal song that it's referencing this notion that life can be scary if you just sit back as a passive observer, but if you get into it and you really start digging it, then you can find great enjoyment in life. So yeah, to me, it is kind of a Zen themed song. Another interesting tidbit about the Waka Jawaka, and for many albums after Waka Jawaka, you'll see the credit for a bass player called Erroneous. And Erroneous was this guy who was playing with Ainsley Dunbar in the Ainsley Dunbar Retaliation. That's where Frank met them, was at the Emojis Festival in Belgium. And so Erroneous's real name is Alex, and I am going to really butcher the last name, but it's Machowski, Alex Machowski, and I think that's how. But you see, Alex didn't have a valid visa. He had a visa that was valid when initially he came over to the U.S., but he overstayed the time limit of his visa, so he was in the country illegally. So while he was recording with Frank to protect his identity, he adopted the name Erroneous. So that's where the name Erroneous comes from. So the other thing I kind of think about with this is, with Bert Weenie's Sandwich, you have the first song and the last song being these doo-wop singles that are like the bread on the rest of the record, which is the meat of the sandwich, all this melding of orchestral and jazz fusion together, in between. And to me, Waka Jawaka does that in a way too, because you've got the opener with Big Swifty, the closer with Waka Jawaka. There are these two huge, big band jazz fusion pieces, and then in between you've got these two somewhat, silly little lyrical songs in between. So I just kind of find that I haven't really found anything that describes the way the record was put together as that was the intention. Whereas you can find many references with Bert Weenie's Sandwich that is in fact what was intended. The Bert Weenie Sandwich, the bread are the two doo-wop pieces, and then the sandwich is everything in between. So yeah, that's Waka Jawaka. So this is clearly one of my favorite Zappa records, and of the Grand Wazoo period, it is my favorite one. Although there are a couple other releases from the period that are on CD only. One of them is Wazoo, and then the other one is Imaginary Diseases. I really like Imaginary Diseases as well, but I'll get to those recordings in another video. Just as in another video, I'll talk more about the next album to be released right after Waka Jawaka, which was the Grand Wazoo. Actually, the original plan was the Grand Wazoo was going to be released first, but for some reason they ended up releasing Waka Jawaka first. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Leave a comment in the down under. I, of course, will have a link to my Frank Zappa playlist, so you can also look at the other videos I've made so far as I am going through the catalog, including some other videos, documentaries, and Frank Zappa related videos that will be in that playlist. Have a great day, and always remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.